What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Surviving with Create 0.3, and today we're going to be setting up an automated kelp farm. Now, this farm is going to be used for two different things, the first of which is very simple. It's just going to get us a massive surplus of dried kelp, which is going to be extremely useful considering we burn through our dried kelp when we do pretty much any form of automation with Create. If we come in and look at the uses for dried kelp, you will notice a lot of the blocks that we use pretty much every single episode, especially in the recent ones where we've done some very large scale automation, things like the tunnels, the funnels, even the most basic and commonly used form of automation, the mechanical belt, requires so much dried kelp it's not even funny, and I have been burning through my reserves very quickly, and it's becoming a huge problem. So we're going to go with the modded Minecraft solution of automating the production of it to an absurd degree so that we have way more than we could possibly ever use. And then we'll just end up with chests and chests of it, and that's better than not having any of it, so it's a great solution. But on top of that, we're going to be using it for another main reason, which is generating dried kelp blocks, which, if you don't know, make an amazing fuel source in a furnace. They're able to burn for 200 seconds, making them way better than our tree farm generating charcoal, and we'll be using that as a fuel source next episode when we set up our infinite blast furnace, furnace engine, and flywheel setup to get the best power generation in all of Create. So whether you want to set this up just to get dried kelp for crafting stuff, or you want to use it for the most overpowered form of power generation ever in the entire mod, well, it's up to you. I'm going to be using it for both, but the setup's going to be very simple today, so it'll be a nice break after the 1 hour long Builder's Tea episode last time. That was super mentally taxing, and so we'll be having a nice relaxing episode today that's simple but very effective. So we should probably jump into the requirements for today's episode, and thankfully there really aren't that many. Still a lot of things that require dried kelp, unfortunately, but it's not too bad. So we're going to be covering not just a kelp farm today, but also the processing that comes after it to make both dried kelp and then the dried kelp blocks. So that's why there's a little bit more in here. Obviously, you can stop wherever you want in the process and just put it in a chest. But if you want to prep for next episode or just really have a compact storage for your dried kelp, then I would suggest going all the way to the dried kelp blocks in a chest at the end. So we're going to be needing a windmill bearing, 2 radial chassis, 8 sail frames, 2 portable storage interface, 2 chests, 8 mechanical harvesters, 2 brass funnels, 2 andesite funnels, a campfire, a mechanical belt, an encased fan, a basin, a bucket of lava, a smart chute, a stockpile switch, 2 redstone links, 2 cogwheels, 2 large cogwheels, 10 shafts, 4 vertical gearboxes, a depot, a mechanical press, 2 buckets of water. This is just going to be for setting up the actual kelp, so we're going to need a lot more than this, but I'm just going to use these off camera and make an infinite source, but you can do it however you want. And then we are potentially going to need an additional gearbox depending on the direction of rotation that comes from the windmill bearing. So you may or may not need that. We'll be going over that later, but I have it here just to be safe. And then for the rest of the setup, just the miscellaneous things, we're going to obviously need the kelp to plant with it. So I've got 2 stacks here. That should be more than enough. Then we're going to need dried kelp for setting up one of the filters, dried kelp block for setting up another one of the filters, a slime ball for making the radial chassis sticky, some glass for encasing the actual farm since we are going to have water that will spill out if we don't, and then dirt simply for placing things down and orienting stuff properly, like the mechanical harvesters. You will need a block to place behind these that you can easily get rid of, so I would suggest dirt, but you can do whatever you want. So that's really all we're going to need for today's episode. Thankfully, I think we should be able to fit this pretty much in our inventory with no issue. We may be a little bit short on space. Oh my gosh, we need to ditch 2 things. You know what? We'll get rid of our torches because I don't think we're going to need those. And we're going to save our builder's tea because we're going to sip on this when we're done, and we will ditch our bread because we aren't really that hungry right now, so we should be okay. And we can just quickly take a nap before we head outside so that we don't die to stuff. I have had phantoms around me for quite some time now because I just don't sleep since we're always inside, and I am not going to die after 20 episodes on camera. But we're just going to come right back over here where we were working last episode and head outside and start setting this up. Obviously, we got a nice builder's tea going over here. Super thrilled with that setup, by the way. You guys seem to really enjoy it, so I'm super glad about that. But if we come out here, this is where we are going to be setting up the kelp farm. I cleared out a nice big area here. You're not really going to need one that's too crazy. Basically just a 9x9 square that you'll use most of for the kelp farm, and then a little bit off of that, maybe like a 4x5 area for the processing. but you're going to want to make sure you have at least a decently flat area to do this, and I figured why not do it outside, because it's going to be right next to the water here, which just kind of seems appropriate. So to get started, we're going to find the central area of the farm, and we're going to place down our windmill bearings. So if we look, I'd say maybe right here's a solid block. It's going to be going 4 blocks in every direction. So as long as we have that room, we'll go 4 over here, 4 over there, 4 over there. Yep, we're totally fine. We're just going to want to dig down 1 into the ground and put down the windmill bearing. On top of this, we're going to want to put both radial chassis and then use the slime ball to make it sticky on 2 opposing sides, just like this. And this is where we are going to place down both our mechanical harvesters and our sail blocks. Now we're going to want to start out by placing down our sail blocks, and unfortunately, these got nerfed a little bit. You now need 8 of them to make the windmill bearing rotate at all. So we're going to be using 8 instead of 1. It's a little bit unfortunate, but we're going to want to place these down first because we just want to see which direction this rotates. And apparently this does not want to orient nicely on the side here, but there we go. So now we have all 8 of them placed down. This will get us 1 RPM and 512 stress capacity. And if we click, we can watch that it rotates in this direction. So it's going to be going counterclockwise for us. And the reason that's important is because we need to know that for when we put down our mechanical harvesters. We need to make sure that they are facing so that they are rolling in the direction that it's turning. So we're going to put dirt down right back here now, and we are going to place down our mechanical harvesters, 4 on each side, just like this. And a common mistake that is made in these setups is you do not need any block behind these mechanical harvesters for them to actually connect to the radial chassis. If we look here and hover over this, you can see that these all connect. So you don't need a block behind them, but if you do not place these in line with this radial chassis here and pull them out 1 and put down a block behind them, a lot of people use linear chassis, you run into the issue where they will not collect the kelp on this block, this block, this block, or this one. I don't know why that is. I guess it's just because it's not considered actually going over these, but you are making your farm less efficient if you do that. So absolutely do not do that if you can avoid it. That's why these sail frames are up top. So we're going to be doing the same thing over here. We're going to be using these 4 blocks of dirt to place down these appropriately oriented mechanical harvesters. Then we can just get rid of the dirt right here. And we want to make sure that this is scrolled down to 4 so it doesn't accidentally connect to anything around these. This one, we're going to want to scroll it down to 5, and we're going to want to put the chest on one side and the portable storage interface on the other. So it doesn't really matter which one you do. We'll put down the chest over there, the portable storage interface over here. You want to make sure it's oriented facing outward, and then this is what's going to connect to drop off all the kelp. So now that we have this, that's great, right? If we were to come down here, right click on this, it would start spinning. That's super nice. Obviously, it's kind of weird because these in the center don't spin, but I promise you, they will in fact collect the kelp that is down here. Now that we have all this stuff down, we need to map out where the kelp is actually going to grow and where it can be harvested from. So an easy way to do this is build out 1, 2, 3, 4, put down your glass, same thing over here, 4, and then you're going to come over 2 on each of these, and then put down 2 glass right here. So it doesn't perfectly harvest it in a square or even really a circle, but it's going to basically be just like this where you connect them on the sides. And then we're just going to do the same thing over here. We're going to build over 2, then go like that, connect it here, come over another 2, go like that, and whoop, right here. Thankfully we have silk touch, so we're not wasting glass anymore. And then another 2 over here and connect it like that. So this is exactly where the kelp can be harvested. Unfortunately though, we need 2 more things. We need water for the kelp to grow, but we also need to have the kelp placed down 1 block below these mechanical harvesters, so it's treated basically the same as farming sugarcane. Because unfortunately the mechanical harvesters won't replant, I guess you could say, the kelp. It's not the same as wheat seeds, so we're going to need to make sure that it's 1 below. But to make this a little bit less painful to do, the way we're going to go about setting this up is by using water to fill in this entire area up here to start, and then we're going to get rid of the blocks below it and put down the kelp because it will turn it into source blocks anyway. That's a nice effect of kelp, if you guys didn't know, is if you have flowing water coming down and the kelp grows, it turns it into a source block anyway. So instead of having to fill this up for 2 layers of water, we'll only fill it up for 1. So I'm going to quickly do that off camera and plant the kelp just because it's going to take quite some time, and then we can hop back and start setting up the processing for this. Okay guys, so the farm is now up and running. It's working flawlessly. As you can probably already see, the kelp is growing and it's being gathered by this farm, which is great. Kelp grows extremely fast, which bodes really well for us for next episode because we're going to need a lot of it. But I want to use this time to address two questions I suspect you guys will probably have about this setup in the comments. And the first one is going to be, why the windmill bearing over the mechanical bearing? Obviously, the windmill bearing has been nerfed. It used to be super overpowered. You only needed one sail block to get it going at 1 RPM. Now you need 8. A little bit unfortunate, but I will still say that I think this is the best way to set this up if you plan on using rotational power anywhere else. In this case, we're going to be processing it to dried kelp blocks right over here, and that obviously needs stress capacity of some kind. So instead of setting up a mechanical bearing here and having something set up to power both this and the setup over here, I figured why not use the windmill bearing for this? We'll require no power then for this entire setup, and we can use the stuff we're generating for the setup over here to process it. That just seems like the logical way to do it, instead of having one, potentially even two different things set up to power both of these. So I also think it still looks pretty nice, and obviously on this setup, we have room to put in 8 of these without taking up any more room than we already would. And that comes to address my second point, which is why do we have 2 different arms on this when one of these would cover the same area? It would just take twice as long. Now that's because this is currently running at only 1 RPM, so that's obviously very slow, and like I just said, kelp grows very fast. You can see this is getting collected super frequently, and so by having this have 2 arms, we are able to make sure that we get pretty much the most we possibly can out of this setup, so that the minute one of these grows, it's harvested as quickly as we possibly can instead of waiting for the other arm to come all the way around and get it. Obviously, that thing of kelp right there grew right after that arm passed it. And instead of having to wait the entire rotation to get collected and have a chance of growing again, it's going to get collected by this arm. So in this case, because it's running slow, I definitely think it's worth it to have 2 arms to make sure that these aren't sitting there fully grown for a decent chunk of time and not able to grow again. Obviously, that's not going to double our output or anything, but it will increase it significantly, which is definitely a welcome thing. But now we should get ready to set up the processing portion of this setup, the part that I think is a little bit more interesting, and we're going to be doing that right here. First of which, we need to set up the portable storage interface to collect the items from this. So obviously the regular one that's attached to this is going to swing around right over this glass here, and so this block right here will be where we connect the two, meaning we want to come out 1 block from that and then put the second one down. Then we just want to rotate it so they're facing the same direction. But obviously, if we have this right here, unless we have a hopper or a chute or something like that connected to this, nothing is going to come out. Common mistake people make all the time, and I just answered this in my Discord actually, is why if you have a chest next to this, does nothing come out, even though they connect? You need something to pull them out of this. So today we're going to be using a brass funnel onto a depot. So my inventory is completely full and a mess here, but if we can find these two and get them out, we can put down the depot right here and a brass funnel right here. And we just want to make sure that this has the arrow right on the side pointing down to the depot so that the items are being output from this. Now again, you might be wondering why we are using the brass funnel, right? We could use an andesite one since we don't need a filter. The only thing in this setup we're pulling out is going to be regular kelp. That is because the brass funnel is able to pull out all the way up to a stack of items at a time, which is exactly what we want. Every time this goes around, we will be getting probably 10 to 15 things of kelp. Obviously not a full stack, but if we had an andesite funnel or even a hopper, we would end up with a single piece of kelp on this depot, thus increasing the time it takes to cook all of it down significantly. When you're able to process it as a full stack, it reduces the time to cook it, which makes this setup way more compact and a lot easier to work with. Instead of people running it single through this or on a belt system individually, this will save you so much. So now we're going to take out our campfire. You can also see right here it puts down a stack. They're nice and layered on top of each other in a very aesthetically pleasing way, by the way. But we're going to put down our campfire directly next to this depot. Doesn't matter if you have it here right next to it or up one. If you blow it on both levels, it will still cook down the kelp. And then we're going to grab out our encased fan and we're going to put it down facing into this campfire. So then we're going to power this eventually, and we're going to want to make sure it's blowing when the time comes, and that will cook this down into dried kelp. The next thing we need to do is clear out 4 things right here, just running alongside the front of this, and we are going to put down shafts on the 2 end blocks and connect these with a belt. And this is where the rest of the setup is going to run. So we're going to need to take out a brass funnel, our second one, put it down right here, and we're going to want to set the filter for dried kelp because we want to make sure that once this is running, obviously right now this belt isn't running, so no item will get pulled out of here, but if it were to be running right now, this kelp would come out without being cooked. We need to make sure it sits there for a sufficient amount of time till it turns into dried kelp, then it's allowed to come out onto this belt. The next thing we need to do is put down our basin, which can go right here, and we're going to want to get rid of this little chute on the side there, and this is going to be used for turning the dried kelp into a dried kelp block. If we look at the recipe for this, you can use automated packing to turn 9 of these into a dried kelp block. This is how we're going to store it. If we look at the uses for this, you can see that you can convert it back to 9 dried kelp whenever you want. So even if you do not plan on using this as a fuel source, it's a great way to do a compact storage method for just dried kelp in general, and then you can convert it whenever you need it. So we'll be putting this down right here. And then we're going to be putting an andesite funnel going right into this on the belt. We don't need to worry about filtering anything, which is great. It's just going to all get thrown right in here. And then we need to have the mechanical press for packing this down. So we're going to want to put it here and make sure it is facing so that we have the rotational power input facing towards this encased fan over here. So unfortunate news, guys, apparently we ran into another issue where something worked in a creative world when setting it up and now it doesn't. So we can quickly run through that. Maybe you guys can get it to work in your world. If not, we're just going to come up with a solution right now to fix it, which is very easy. But maybe it's a chunk boundary issue just like the huge one last episode, who knows? But the main issue stems from right here, where if we were to put down an andesite funnel, this chute then goes away. Now in my creative world, and I have a screenshot of it right now, this chute is still present on here. It does not go away, making it even more compact to automate the output of the basin and the input of this chest. Obviously, I didn't think that was supposed to work because I do know that these funnels and things like that are supposed to take up this block space, not leaving room for the chute to come out of the basin. But I guess that's how the cookie crumbles. It works in the creative world like always, and then not in here. But thankfully, there's a very easy solution. It's just going to require us to have one additional shaft for this setup for later down the road when we transfer rotational power. So all we're going to do is collect our chest back, collect our shaft back right there, and our belt. And then we're going to put down the shaft right here, rotate it, grab out our belt, and connect these two again. So it just needs to be one further over from this basin so we can put down the chest and the andesite funnel going in there. Now we should have no issue whatsoever. Now we should be good to get back to setting this up though, and the first thing that we want to do is set up a sort of fail-safe turn-off switch in case we end up getting a massive surplus of these dried kelp blocks and the system eventually would get backed up. And the way to do this is very simple. It's going to be using a stockpile switch put right here onto this chest. We're going to set the filter to dried kelp blocks because that's what's going to be stored in here, and we're going to want to invert the signal, and you can set this to whatever percent you want. So you're just going to want to set it to, I don't know, something like, again, however much you want. I can set it to 50, and we can make sure that this will kick back on when it gets down to 25. And what this will do is output a redstone signal until this gets to 50% full, then it will turn it off. And then once it gets all the way back down to 25% full, it will kick it back on. Now the way we're going to use this is by taking one of our wireless redstone links, putting it right here. You can see it's getting a signal. We're going to set this to the frequency of kelp on frequency 1, and then we are going to come over here, and right below this brass funnel, we're going to come down, and again, we have to deal with the stuff going onto the belt system, so we don't want that to happen, but we are going to come down here, and we're going to set up a smart chute, and we're going to set up some lava for stuff to dump into. So we'll put the smart chute right here. We're going to set the filter. You can set it to dried kelp. I don't think it really matters. Either way, anything on here is going to be dried kelp, so it'll fall through regardless. And then directly below this, I want to make sure I'm not down there, but we're going to put our lava right on the ground. And this will just dump any dried kelp that's coming in here into the lava, obviously burning it up, making sure that it does not get into the setup to back it up any further. And now we can just cover this back up. And finally, we can put down our second redstone link right down here, set it to frequency 1, shift right click so it's receiving, and now no items will be able to go through this smart chute because it's receiving a redstone signal. So if we were to throw this right here, if it wanted to go onto the belt, if there's something on there, I don't know. There we go. You can see that it will not fall through. But if there were to be no redstone signal there, and I think we don't need the dried kelp for anything else, so just making sure that we're not about to mess up and get rid of something we needed to filter. But if we were to come over here and let's say get rid of this frequency, this should then get pulled down because there is no redstone signal there anymore. So because this setup is one where you really will run into an issue eventually if you're not burning through it, a surplus of the dried kelp blocks and a backup, and because the kelp grows so fast and you'll be left with a ton of entities in here floating around lagging you or your server, this is really important to have. So then we can just come over here and cover this back up like it's not even there. And now the last thing to do is get rotational power to this. So we want to come over here right next to where this basin is outputting, put down a shaft, then we are able to grab out our vertical gearboxes. We're going to want to put one here like this, one over here to go into the encased fan, bring a shaft coming up, and then we're going to want to use two more vertical gearboxes, one bringing this over, and then we're going to want to use a horizontal one so we can just turn this right here to put it into the mechanical press. Now, direction does not matter up here for these. The press is going to work regardless, but direction is important for this encased fan down here and for the belt system that's running. So to get rotational power over here, we're going to have to dig down and we're going to run it all the way to this mechanical belt right here. But we need to make sure that we're going all the way under the dirt that's used in this setup. So we've got the kelp right in front of us, then we've got the dirt. So we need to be using this block right down here to run under this setup until we get to the windmill bearing. And if we calculate it out, it should be here, and then it should be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should be this block right here. Let's see how right we are. Boom, right on the money. So we're going to come down with our shaft. Then we are going to put down our gearbox right like this down here, and then run the shafts all the way along to get back over here. And we should be able to dig a little bit of an area out right here because we are going to sort of tier up the speed of this rotational power 2 times before it gets over here, because you don't need to have it at anything like 16, 32 RPM, anything like that, but having it at 1 is a little bit slow. So we're going to get it up to 4 using 2 regular cogwheels and 2 large cogwheels. So we're going to start out with a large cogwheel right here. And again, we got to clear out even more of an area to work with. But then we're going to start large, put down a regular cogwheel. Then again, we are going to put down a large cogwheel. And we are going to come to another regular one, which I believe should go right here. And then we can just run shafts to connect this together. And we'll be able to see that it is going in the correct direction. So if we connect this like so and like that, we can now come up here with our dirt. And we actually probably should fill in a little bit of the area down here first so that nothing potentially spawns in here. And we're not going to be seeing it, so it does not really matter that I know it bothers some of you guys that these kind of clip into blocks and stuff, but this should be fine. And now we have the setup good to go. This should be going at 4 RPM. We can check by going over this right here. We have our engineer's goggles on. I wonder why we can't see. There we go. Okay, we can see it when we look at the shaft. 4 stress units on the belt, which means it's running at 4 RPM because it has a stress impact of 1 times the RPM. And you can already see that we have the dried kelp coming over here. We have so much though that this needs to press some of it into blocks before it can accept the rest of this. So we're going to get a decent amount coming in here right now. Should be ready to go again. Obviously it's very slow, but we only have this backup because this system has been running this entire time while I've been talking and building. So we've got a little bit of this stuff to burn through first. So you can see the system is running flawlessly. It's nice and compact, and you will end up with a massive surplus of dried kelp blocks. And we can burn through the rest of this kelp whenever. You can see more of it got unloaded here. And this is slowly getting brought in here since this does have a max of 16 of a single one, I believe. And then you can have a bunch of others in here, but I think it has a max of 16 per item type in here. But I think it's going to be it for today, guys. Obviously, this does not look amazing out here, but in the coming episodes, we'll be doing more around here, so I am going to improve how this looks. I do already have ideas, but I wanted to get this set up first so I knew the area it was taking up and what we could work with. So if you have any suggestions though, feel free to let me know. Next episode though is going to be the best power generation you can get in all of Create. And it's going to be using a couple tricks that a lot of you guys probably haven't thought of yet, but I'm super excited for that one. We're going to be getting ourselves a maxed out flywheel and furnace engine using the blast furnace, which will run at 32 RPM instead of 16 with a regular furnace like we did before. My gosh, that's a mouthful. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to that. Hopefully you guys are able to get use out of this setup too. But again, that's going to be it for today, and I will talk to you later.